Ukraine's president says his country is committed to talks with the US that are due to start in Saudi Arabia on Tuesday. Volodymyr Zelensky wrote on X that realistic proposals are on the table. That's as protesters in Washington unveiled what they said is the world's largest Ukrainian flag near the White House. They called on President Donald Trump to support the embattled nation. Days ago, Trump paused US military aid and intelligence sharing with Ukraine as it defends against Russia's invasion. Well, Zelensky also spoke about upcoming talks with European allies and with the United States. So let's listen to some of what he said.
There will be many meetings and many conversations in the near future. I believe that there will be solutions. We're also in constant contact with the American team. We are preparing a meeting in Saudi Arabia. I am confident that the meeting will be productive. We in Ukraine are determined for this. Very much so.
Well, for more, let's speak to Fabrice Potier, CEO at Rasmussen Global, an international political consultancy firm, and he joins us today from Tokyo. Great to have you on DW News, Fabrice. So we've seen some wild swings in US policy in the few weeks since Donald Trump took office, including cutting off support for Ukraine. So is this a make or break moment for the peace talks in Saudi Arabia?
Well, I think what we're seeing here is Donald Trump not only twisting President Zelensky's arm, but breaking his arm, and actually both arms, cutting intelligence and surveillance data, cutting the spare parts and the maintenance of the F-16 program in Ukraine, leaning on the allies not to provide the technology where the US has a say. I mean, this is a way to really constrain President Zelensky and force him into a peace negotiation. The problem, it might work, but the outcome might not be the right one. And we might see in the next month or next years a repeat of the full-scale invasion. So I think we're in a very dangerous situation here.
Yeah, OK. From what you're saying there, it does indeed sound like a pretty dangerous situation. So is it safe to say that Ukraine is going into these talks in a very weakened position? And what can it do in order to, I suppose, alleviate the situation for itself going into the talks?
Well, sadly, weakened position because Donald Trump decided that the one party that he was going to lean on was not the Russians, but the Ukrainians, which was already on the back foot, on the front line, as we know, for some months. So he made, I think, that determination that probably it's easier to break Ukraine's arms than to twist Putin's arms. And yes, indeed, they're entering the negotiation in a rather weak position. They have, I think, for them, both their will. President Zelensky has actually, the popular support for him has increased since all this swing, the US swing towards Russia. And President Zelensky also has a strong show of solidarity and support from the Europeans. But the reality, and this is what the European leaders told him last week, you still need to go via Washington because Washington holds many of the key cards to settle this.
Now, you've worked as a strategic policy planner at NATO. After everything that we've seen in the last few weeks, do you see the transatlantic partnership at breaking point?
I don't know if it's breaking point, but it's a big awakening for the Europeans that this relationship, the way it was understood, is no longer the same. And there will be obviously transatlantic cooperation, but it might become more punctual, more residual. And increasingly, the core is going to be now generated by the Europeans themselves. And this is why President Macron is right to have launched an open discussion with his European counterparts about having a European nuclear deterrence. Because fundamentally, I think the notion that the US will be there and will assure security in Europe is gone. The US is still in Europe for the time being, but I think the notion there is now some uncertainty behind this proposition, and therefore the transatlantic cooperation is not going to be what it used to be, very clearly.